politics. Yay!
I'm Dom.
I'm Simon.
Last name redacted, although I think it's been doxed at this point.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
No, and I'm Simon.
I someone.
I would never. No. And I'm Simon Eastman, the man who doxed Dominic. And today, I recommended that we call this just the MAGA episode, really.
Yeah,
because the majority of politics have been going on the past 2 weeks, so you couldn't do it last week because you're mocks.
Okay, further doxing me, but alright.
What, that you're doing mocks with students? It's an open secret.
Okay, that's
the point of the fucking podcast. You couldn't do it last week because you're
prove we're
mocks.
students, actually. People won't believe us.
We are students.
We are students.
I will show my fucking passport. No, but we're students. You're doing your mocks. As you couldn't record it last week. So now we've had 2 weeks of not just regular politics like I wanted to do. I wanted to go a bit more international this week. I wanted to explore a bit of what was going on around the world rather than just the English-speaking countries. Then Trump came along and fucked up everything. There isn't the half...
Our politics podcast today has literally been overtaken.
It's the Trump podcast.
By Trump.
It's the Trump podcast, right? So we're going to be talking about that instead of a lot of the international stuff I want to talk about, but who the fuck cares? And so I think we should. I believe you wanted to talk about fascism before we got into this.
So I think we live in such a tempestuous and volatile world right now where we're using these big buzzwords like fascism. I think it's really easy to have presuppositions about what fascism is and what we construed as fascism. Now, I think to slander someone by calling them a fascist, that has to be substantiated because else it's reductionist to real fascists. Yeah. So I'm going to try and explain it in the context of how fascism emerged in Italy from 1870 to Mussolini's final dismissal in 1943, but then being executed by the partisan movement in 1945. So he was ousted pretty much by his own people. I think a lot of people will know the famous execution.
They hung him up by a gas station.
Wouldn't recommend searching it up. It's egregious. So
you could find so many execution line. My dad, when they found Saddam Hussein, he watched the execution live. He watched Saddam Hussein's execution live.
You're doxing your dad now.
What? He watched a live stream.
Okay.
He watched Saddam Hussein's execution live. It was fucking awesome. Apparently, you can find it online. It's not hard.
Moving on. So I think I'm going to contextualise this in how fascism emerged in Italy. So we come to 1870, the Risorgimento in Italy. So Italy, preceding this, has been partitioned into different states. So it's been Sicily, Emilia-Romagna, Lombardy, etc. It's not been a unified nation as it once was under the Roman era. You then get
It's just like the German thing, where it's all those little tiny states.
Yeah, but
and then
the problem is, it's really they're really diametrically opposed how fascism emerged in Germany compared to how it emerged in Italy, because fascism emerged in Germany because of people unified around fascism, whereas what happened in Italy was because fascism was really perceived as the only viable option. I guess to an extent with the failure of the Weimar Republic it was in Germany, but I think people generally were emotionally invested in fascism. What in Germany, what you see in Italy is people didn't really care that much about it. They were indoctrinated to an extent, but they were never fascistised. They never became a nation of fascists. So you get the Risorgimento, the amalgamation of all the states, but at this point there's no Italian feeling. There's no sentiment of feeling Italian. So
it's closing the curtain. Sorry.
Okay. Please. So I guess we all have our presupposition about what Italian people may be.
Yeah. Oh my god, stupid fucking bike.
But that's certainly not true for the Risorgimento of 1870. Italians don't feel Italian. And what is predicated from this as well is a system of coalitions called the Trasformismo system. So this is a system where no one gets, it's not proportional representation, but no one gets a full enough majority to sustain a majority government. So there's a lot of backhand deals, there's a lot of coalitions, etc. So it's very weak government, and people fundamentally don't feel represented, and that obviously plays into the fact that people don't feel Italian. So from there, you go past all the Risorgimento governments, you get this guy called Giolitti. Now, Giolitti polarises Italy. He tries to pursue this sort of middle way approach, that he wants to, fundamentally he implements this system called Grand Trasformismo, which is the even larger scale of the Trasformismo system, in which he tries to keep all parties inside the tent. But what actually happens is he tries to appease the elitists, so the Confindustria and the proletariat. He tries to appease the socialists. Now, we can't do that because those two don't cooperate.
They sound a little bit familiar.
It sounds familiar. Fundamentally, you can't, when you try and appease everyone, I think this is a problem with centrist parties a lot. They're never fundamentally going to work because people have such diametrically opposing views. And also that, what it did to socialists who were fairly moderate in 1900 is it maximised them. So they became revolutionary. They really waned into the Marxist, violent socialism. And then basically you get the emergence of World War One. That splits them even more. They're now split. The liberals, who Giolitti leads, are split between the interventionists and the neutralists. So you've got a completely polarised system. You then get the failure of World War One. So Italy enter into World War One in the Treaty of London. They don't get a good deal. Basically, Britain and France fucked them over.
Yeah, so I think for context there, Italy was originally in Central Powers, I believe. They didn't participate in the war.
They did. So they only entered the war in 1915. Okay. Because basically they were part of the Triple Alliance. Now they left that because Austria-Hungary had attacked Serbia in interaction to the treaty, and then they joined the
Triple Entente.
Get your French pronunciation.
I'm not. They're French. Please.
So c'est très.
Oh, shut up.
No, this isn't a French.
We only briefly touch on the French politics in this, like a little bit.
Yeah. So then you get the ultimate calamity that is World War One, and from this, the socialists become even more maximalist. They become even more revolutionary, and they enact this thing called the Biennio Rosso, which in Italian I believe translates to like the 2 red years. So it's this tumultuous time of constant striking. And what you get from this is a symbiotic growing of fascism. So fascism grows out of trying to stop socialism. It grows originally in Italy, not as a party, but as a movement, as a fasci di combattimento. So the fascist combat movement, essentially. And then what happens, you have a liberal government who actually, this time, appease the socialists, so they give in to all their concessions, which only exacerbates their violence. And then essentially, you get a bunch of things that happen, but the fascists are invited into this thing called the National Bloc, which is like a sort of quasi-coalition thing, like a confidence and supply deal. So like the Tories and the DUP, that they essentially let fascists come into government, and then what happens is there's a general strike in 1922, and Mussolini basically purports that the only way to save Italy from the plague of socialism is to appoint him as leader, and the liberals being so scared and thinking similarly at this point as they had done before, that they can actually control him, that a lot of these a lot of these fascist systems are predicated on the naivety of other parties, thinking that they can constrain them. A lot of time, sometimes you can, but it is very circumstantial. But this basically leads to Mussolini threatening an invasion of Rome. He calls it the March on Rome, if they don't appoint him. And at that point, King Victor Emmanuel appoints Mussolini, and he begins to lead for 21 years after that, until he's disposed in a coup by members of his own fascist party. You then get the Germans who invade Italy. They invade the north and they partition Italy between the Kingdom of the South, which is occupied by the Allies, and they came in the invasion of Sicily in 1943, and you get the Salian Republic. So basically, Mussolini's reinstalled as a puppet leader, but he's not really Mussolini at this point. He's lost
Hitler's
it.
bitch.
He's Hitler's bitch. He was actually for a lot of the 30s, and his whole cult of personality really dissipated before, but it completely eviscerates at this point. And then what you get is these partisan movements, so coalitions of different parties who at one point wouldn't work together, and that's what actually enabled fascism. Because if people don't, and I think this is the importance, so personally, the importance of free speech. If people don't talk and people don't coalesce and work together, then it allows these extremist parties. We have to try and derogate from our differences and find some kind of unifying thread. But then these partisan movements, essentially, and the Allies at the same time, dispose of Mussolini, and he is killed and hung in a gas station. Which, like we said,
it's a brutal way to go.
Yeah, it's
he was a dickhead. That's a brutal way to go, though.
If anyone did GCSE English, it reminds me of a poem, Ozymandias.
Ozymandias,
it does. It's very simple. I'm not sure. Yeah, you know what I mean. But there's a lot of parallels between that and Mussolini's tenure. The fact that he thought his cult of personality was impenetrable, and really it wasn't. Really, people were only ever indifferent to fascism. In that time period, especially in this, I know it was very different in Germany. You're going to talk about the rise of the AfD now, but I mean it's really important that we contrive ourselves what fascism is, because fascism does not have really a set ideology. Obviously, nationalism plays a core tenet of it, and the core personality. But in terms of economy, there's no real. If someone's conservative economically, there's no parallels necessarily between that and fascism, because a lot of fascists, a lot of autocratic leaders have been left-leaning. Mussolini was a socialist. He wrote as a journalist for the newspaper Avanti. He did actually get disposed of though, because he was a proponent of the war. But he was a socialist, and he took a very middle way approach to the economy a lot of time. He implemented this thing called the corporate state. I mean, he was a lot more left-leaning economically than, I'd say, Hitler. But I think people got disseminate the fact that it's not really about your economic stance to the same degree as it is about how you lead and what methods you use to gain support and retain your power. That's really the core of fascism.
So I want to briefly touch on the Nazis a little bit.
Okay,
just a little bit, because I think there's an important distinction to be made between Mussolini's type of fascism and the Nazis.
It was very different.
Main thing is the racism, right? So
weirdly, sorry, I'm just gonna interject. Mussolini was so dichotomous because he actually was he advocated against anti-Semitism in the 1930s, and then obviously as his tenure progressed, he began to facilitate the Holocaust. 4,000 Jews were sent to concentration camps in 1943, so he changes completely.
So
at that point.
So basically, a lot of the Hitler story starts. Basically, the main point it starts is in 1928 in the federal elections in Germany. The SPD, the Social Democratic Party, they've been in opposition.
I believe they still a party.
They're still a thing now.
Yeah.
They were in opposition for about 5 odd years beforehand, since 1923, and they get a 30% majority. So they win quite a few seats, but it's not enough to form a stable government. So in order to combat their main opposition, which was the German National People's Party, which is like, think of it. That's place. It's a more right-leaning, more nationalist version of the Conservatives. Think of it more like
the Christian Democrats. Would you say?
I'd say I'd say more along the lines of Reform UK, honestly. Like a bit
in terms of
economically speaking, they were right wing. They were very nationalist, but not obviously Nazi levels. And in order to combat that, the SDP forms a grand coalition. The Chancellor is the
the common theme here.
Yeah, the SPD leader Hermann Müller. He forms an SDP, a grand coalition, not with the communist left, but he forms it with the other centre parties. So there's the centrists, and most importantly, there's the DVP, which is a conservative but liberal party, and their head is Gustav Stresemann. Now, Gustav Stresemann, he was appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs in the previous government, and the SPD...
Was he Minister of Economic Affairs?
He was just Minister...
the Stresemann plan.
Well, I'll get onto that.
Okay.
So he was Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gustav Stresemann, and he begins... And he was Minister of Foreign Affairs before the SPD government, but then he comes in again as Minister of Foreign Affairs under the SPD government. So he tries to enact the Young Plan, which helped decrease war reparations needing to be paid to the Allies, and ultimately it unfortunately falls through. And then in addition, the new Hoover administration in the United States is implementing massive trade tariffs on most products everywhere, and it lessens US credit to Germany. So the US plan is now growing discontent.
There's something similar happening right now.
It is, isn't it? So the plan with the US is growing discontent, and some fringe parties like the communists, and this little party you may not have heard of called the Nazis. They are growing discontent with the liberal democratic process. They start gaining a little bit of ground. Stresemann instead decides to pursue closer ties with Britain and France, and he manages to get French troops to withdraw from the Rhineland, which was a French-occupied zone. It was still part of Germany, but the French troops were occupying it as a DMZ after World War One, and he was perhaps even in the process of forming an economic and political union in Europe, similar to what the EU is now, in order to counterweight the fast-growing economy. You can't come in, you stupid fucking cat. We're recording in here. You can't come in. So I have a cat outside, and he's begging to come in, but no, you're going to mess up the podcast, right? So, basically, Gustav Stresemann tries to form, like, a potential EU, essentially, right?
I mean, it's more like an economic...
It's an economic thing. It's an economic and political union in Europe in order to counterweight the now vastly growing economy of the United States. It's the roaring 20s, everything's going fucking nuts, right?
And for some people.
Yeah. And then eventually he manages to convince the Reichstag to go through with the Young Plan. But just after this, Grossman has a series of strokes and dies at age 51, right? And unfortunately, around this time, this is when things start to go a bit downhill. Wall Street crash happens. Great Depression. Everyone's unemployed. Dow Jones Industrial Average loses, like, so much of its value overnight. It's insane. Right? So it not only just hits the US economy, it also hits the German economy, because they're still reeling from hyperinflation, still having to pay war reparations for the Treaty of Versailles, and the economy's hit really bad. By 1932, 6 million Germans are now unemployed due to the hit on large industrial corporations. Small and medium businesses, they're hit even harder. Some have to close down because they just can't afford to pay the workers anymore. And the German banks, they faced massive collapses, loans weren't being repaid, and credit froze. massive panic in the banking sector, and it's further deepening the crisis. The German mark lost inexplicable amounts of value, and the financial system becomes unstable, which leads to more business closures and layoffs. And due to a heavy reliance on an economy based on exports, a global trade halt further crippled the German economy, right? And Hoover is still placing tariffs on shit, which makes the German economy hit even worse, right? And Germany now basically can't trade with the United States because of these tariffs, right? So then eventually the SDP coalition collapses because they're trying to increase national insurance contributions for employers. They're trying to increase employees' national insurance contributions.
How dare they increase national insurance? Disgusting.
And then it means workers would have to be paid less, and wages are already falling. Wages are falling through the floor, and they're having to pay more to the government on a nothing, or basically an income of nothing.
Yeah, you see these pictures of people carrying wheelbarrows of
That was
cash.
That was actually hyperinflation. Hyperinflation, basically.
That's true.
The Weimar government, in order to pay more reparations, we'll just print more money. This isn't going to change anything.
It's something, weirdly, there's a lot of parallels between what they're doing and Canada. That's what Canada's doing a lot now. They're printing a lot of money.
Exactly. And eventually then the shopkeepers, they'll see, German people have got more money, I'll increase my prices. Then the Weimar government goes, prices are going up, we'll make more money. And it's a cycle like this until eventually it costs a wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread. It's ridiculous. But then anyway, back to 1928. The SPD coalition collapses. The SPD is now no longer in control of the government, and President Paul von Hindenburg, he's a World War I general. He's right-leaning. He has his right-leaning tendencies. He appoints Heinrich Brüning, who's a leader of the Centre Party, as the new chancellor. Now the Centre is in a governing minority, and they have 61 seats in the Reichstag, which is around 12%, right? And intending to liberate Germany from its war debts, it increases wages and tightens the credit. These are widely unpopular in the Reichstag. They voted down the policies before Brüning passed them by himself anyway, ruling by presidential decree, essentially. The Reichstag, once again, rejected the decree, with nearly all parties voting against it, including the SPD and the Communists, right? Brüning then calls for dissolution of the current government from Hindenburg, and he gladly obliges. Hindenburg does not like Brüning at this point, right? Another election is to be held on September 14th, 1930, and this is when we start to get little whisperings. There's a little party called the Nazis, right? Now, by this point, Hitler, who's been a leader of Nazis since about 1920, right? He's an Austrian-born.
Because he wasn't the
He was not the founder.
leader.
No, it was the original. It was originally the German Workers' Party, and there was a coup in the party in 1920.
Yeah.
Hitler takes his place. Right. By this point, the Nazis are kind of viewed as.
Had he enacted the Munich Putsch by this
Yeah,
point?
Munich Putsch. So by this point, they're viewed as kind of extremist terrorists. Because in 1923, they tried to go.
But they
for
also
Munich
gained a lot
Putsch.
of support because they seem to be combating the radical communists.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is so important in today's political climate. If you result in violence, it's so easy for your ideology to be subjugated to some kind of radical notion rather than, and it's really easy. It's like these Just Stop Oil people. Maybe a lot of what they're saying is right, but the way they go about it, it's so easy to just discredit, and it's going to be counterproductive to what they actually want to do.
Yeah. But then basically Hitler and the Nazi Party are viewed as violent extremists. And in the Munich Putsch, inspired by Mussolini's march on Rome, he went to a beer hall in Munich, attempted to overthrow the government, and eventually 4 Nazis ended up dying as a result of German soldiers firing on the march. The Nazi Party was then banned. Hitler goes to prison. He writes Mein Kampf, and he comes back.
He also managed to raise his profile a lot.
He raised his profile because basically the trial it kind of devolved from did you commit high treason, which is a crime that can result in life in prison in Germany by this point, right? Basically Hitler going, well, Nazism is great and you should all join in, and then he gets his sentence for high treason put down to 5 years, of which he only serves 9 months in a quite nice prison cell. It's basically just a borderline apartment with like bars on the windows. He dictates Mein Kampf, he writes it there, publishes it, it sells millions upon millions of copies, but he's still seen as a massive extremist, right? During this time, during the Great Depression, he builds a platform with the German working class. He goes, I can fix all your problems. Come to me. All your problems will just be fixed if I get rid of all the Jews.
This is a very different thing about Hitler's fascism to Italy's Italian fascism, because Italy actually had Germany actually had a clear ideology about fascism, whereas Italian fascism was quite incoherent. So you got to disseminate between those different types of fascism. But the thing that both intertwined them and linked them was the cult of personality. That's always the common factor. It's the cult of personality. Is when it's predicated on an individual, on what they are perceived to have done, rather than what the substance of what they actually have done.
So then what he does is then he appoints Joseph Goebbels as the party's propaganda. He's the head of party's propaganda division. He oversees much of the Reichstag campaign. The Nazis' party membership more than doubled to nearly 300,000 people, right? The party has 49 newspapers, 6 of which are published daily. The campaign is a massive success for Nazis. They end up gaining a large proportion of the vote. They gain 95 seats. That's 18.3% of the vote in an election turnout of 82%, which is the highest since the Weimar Republic was established.
Was this a proportional system?
I'm not entirely sure. I think
because
it's proportional.
that's what this is one of the qualms a lot of people have about proportional systems. It enables extremist parties to be usurped into the government, whereas under first past the post, people like BNP, although they stood, they would feasibly never be able to get a seat, and that's why first past the post is arguably the best system.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, but then now the Nazis are the second largest party in the Reichstag. They're bigger than the centrists. They're bigger than the communists. They're bigger than Gustav's DVP. Now, the SPD, now they're in a situation. They're now in a governing position. They're still kind of governing a little bit. And they attempt to form a coalition with the communists, because those two together will then have 40%. Ernst Thälmann, this fucking genius who leads the Communist Party, says no. He says that, this is his exact quote, Hitler must come to power first, then the requirements for a revolutionary crisis will arrive more quickly. It's this thesis of just like, oh, if we let the extremists get into power, everyone else will see how shit they are, and then we'll just get rid of them. It's this thesis that has never worked, ever.
Yeah,
never worked.
I mean, it's a very negative naivety that allows these parties to come to power a lot of the time.
Yeah. So in Brüning, he loses majority, starts ruling by decree. He starts implementing very harsh austerity measures that are vastly unpopular. But then they end up paving a way for a more authoritarian system of government the Nazis are going to come to thrive upon, right? And because there's a massive majority that Hitler has in the Reichstag, Hitler goes, you know what, I'm going to run for president, right? So now many on the right wing in the Weimar Republic, they are upset that Paul Hindenburg, who they backed in the 1925 presidential election, hasn't just dissolved the Weimar Republic, so they're now backing Hitler. Now the left wanting to combat Hitler, they now back with Hindenburg. So now it's a complete swap of ideologies here. Hitler doesn't win. He gets about 32%, but it's 36%, which is still massive ground, but it's not enough to become president, because Paul von Hindenburg gets 53% and he's still president, even in the second term. It is a testament to Hitler's popularity now and the popularity of the Nazis. Now, Brüning...
Because conversely, actually, in the 1924 election, even though Mussolini won a substantial majority, he only got circa 26% of the vote.
So, also, I'm sorry if you listeners can hear that. There was a little girl crying next door particularly loudly.
Very annoying.
They do this all the time.
We need to get some soundproofing. I think
we need a studio is what we need.
Yeah. So any sponsors?
NordVPN, baby, come sponsor us. No. Okay, so then Brüning, he attempts a land redistribution policy. Hindenburg, who owns land himself, vocally opposes this, forces Brüning to resign, and he is then replaced by Franz von Papen, who is a centrist politician. Now, Papen is a recommendation made to Hindenburg by Kurt von Schleicher. Now, Kurt von Schleicher, he's a right-wing, aristocratic, former World War I general, and he successfully halted the Kerensky offensive in World War One, which is a massive push by the Russians. Fell through. But in order to curb the left's threats, the aristocratic elite posed by the Social Democratic Party and the Communists, he thinks that he can use and weaponize the Nazis in order to combat the left, while keeping them under his control.
Which is what we saw in Mussolini.
We saw Mussolini do, yeah. So Schleicher slowly, he wears Hindenburg down, convincing him to work with the Nazis and hiring Papen, a chancellor who Schleicher and Hindenburg can very easily manipulate, because Papen, he's a bit of a pussy, realistically. Right. So, then Schleicher believes he has everything in place. But Hitler has another idea. He wants him first. He is numero uno in this situation, right? So then, federal election comes through in July of 1932. The Nazis win 37.27%. They are now the largest party in the Reichstag. They have the majority of the seats. They have more than the SDP and the Communists combined. So now they have 230 seats. And now they're getting too big for Schleicher to control. Hitler goes to Schleicher, and he goes, I want to be Chancellor. Gimme. Right? And Schleicher it's just like this has come so out of left field. He's like, I thought I could control these guys. Now he's running for president. Now he realizes that they're no longer talking to a servant of Schleicher. Now they're talking to a highly ambitious nutcase, right? Schleicher and Papen both managed to convince Hindenburg to go, hey, let's dissolve the Reichstag. You can rule by presidential decree, and we can get rid of the Nazis. We can solve it all right now, right? So Papen has one very simple task. He needs to get the Speaker of the Reichstag's attention to show him Paul von Hindenburg's request to dissolve the Reichstag. There's one small problem. The Speaker of the Reichstag is Hermann Goering, who is basically, he's Hitler's strongman. He ends up becoming head of the Luftwaffe and the Interior Minister for Prussia after this, right? The Communists, they don't like Papen. No one in the Reichstag really likes Papen anyway, so Communists attempt to go for a vote of no confidence in Papen's government. And Papen, he expects this. He expects someone to interject, though, and stop it. No one interjects. So quickly, he's now scrambling. He stands up. It's caught in this fantastic photograph. He stands up. He tries to get Hermann Goering's attention to show Hindenburg wants the Reichstag dissolved as fast as humanly possible. Goering turns away. He just looks the other way, calls a vote of no confidence, and Papen is voted out in like a massive majority. It is 512 to 42 against Papen. It's insane, right? So frustrated this, Papen quickly calls a snap election, and then Hindenburg dismisses Papen, and he replaces him with Kurt von Schleicher. Schleicher is now the Chancellor, and his now primary objective is now to stop the Hitler Nazis in whatever way he can, right? Next federal election comes around, and the economy is kind of looking on the up. The Nazis lose 34 seats in the Reichstag. So now the platform's now gone. The platform was, I'm going to fix the economy. The economy's fixed without them. So now they're losing their kind of base. Not only that, but a bunch of really power-hungry Nazis who want the power chance for themselves. They're beginning to defect. They're being picked up by Schleicher into his cause. And years of campaigning for the Nazis have left them on the verge of bankruptcy. They're very nearly broke, right? And Hitler may be losing all his power. This could be the end of the Nazis right now. Except, of course, we know that's not the case. What he does is Hitler meets with Papen in January of 1933. And Papen, he doesn't agree with Hitler on a lot of things, right? But he still sees him as a way of getting back into power and to get back at Schleicher, who betrayed him.
There's a lot of self-preservation.
Yeah. So then, Papen, he begins to collaborate, and they vow to form a coalition next election. Papen then goes to Hindenburg, and he says, Hindenburg, big guy, listen, right? You let Hitler become Chancellor. Let him become Chancellor. I'll become Vice-Chancellor. I'll manage him. And the German people can see how much of a useless twat this guy is. I know all our problems will be solved. There will not be an issue in Nazis anymore, because the people will see how bad he is, and they'll vote him out. Then on the 30th of January 1933, Hitler's appointed as Chancellor, and then now Goering is now in a position he wants to now gain, and he now wants to curry favor with Hitler. So what he does is allegedly Allegedly, he may or may not have set fire to the Reichstag in order to discredit the communists. Now, at the Nuremberg trials, someone said that he was at a meeting with Goering, and Goering apparently said that he set fire to the Reichstag. Goering denied this. It's all up in the air, a lot of it. But it's strongly believed by a lot of academics it is a Nazi plot to discredit the communists, the Reichstag fire. Right? So then the fire's quelled, but then Nazis began playing the blame game. They go, it's a communist plot, it's a conspiracy. And they immediately call upon Hindenburg to issue the Reichstag, issue the Reichstag fire decree, which is hinging on Article 48 of the Weimar Constitution, which will call for the suspension of habeas corpus, the suspension of freedom of speech, and freedom of the press. And now...
This might not be the right time to say, but there's some very similar parallels to this and Star Wars.
It's the same fucking
yeah, it's
plot.
The plot
He inspired
of the prequel.
No, basically, George Lucas, it was inspired by that. It was like that. He had a lot of inspirations for the original trilogy.
Yeah.
It was mainly Vietnam and the American Revolution.
Yeah.
Rebels were the Viet Cong, the American Revolution, or the American militia, and the Empire were either the Americans in Vietnam or they were the British in the American Revolution, depending on how you look at it. But the prequels very heavily inspired by the rise of the Nazis, very clearly.
I think as well, we really dive out now, the relationship between the Emperor and Anakin is very similar to Mussolini and Hitler. Really
Exactly.
Scary.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry,
so Goering now has ample reason to arrest any political opponents he wants, and he teams up with Heinrich Himmler, who is the head of the SS, a Nazi paramilitary division. He also teams up with Ernst Röhm, who's the head of the SA. They both collaborate and arrest as many political prisoners they possibly can. They arrest like 100,000 people in 6 months. It's insane. But now they're in a situation wherein, we've got all these people, where do we put them? Concentration camps. They make the concentration camps, and they suppress any report of any mass killings that are going on there. They actively execute prisoners, especially if they're Jewish. And there's an awful scene in there. This one, I think, a deputy judiciary, I forget his name. He basically had to go and report on this, and there were 4 people who had allegedly attempted to escape, and they'd thrown them on the floor, just in the middle of the floor, and then he was like, "Can you really treat a human being like this? This is inhumane." They found out they'd been shot from close range. They were executed for being Jewish.
I just don't know how human beings are capable of that.
It's just
human beings are
despicable.
disgusting race, really.
They're the only race that makes you pay to be alive. Is so then eventually, in and out of the Reichstag, there's an outrage about these fires. It's like, so basically then, the Nazis now they managed to pass this act. This is almost the exact words of the act. In addition to the procedure prescribed by the Constitution and laws of the Reich, may also be enacted by the government of the Reich. Laws enacted by the government of the Reich may deviate from the Constitution as long as they do not affect the institutions of the Reichstag and the Reichsrat. The rights of the president remain unaffected. Treaties of the Reich with foreign states, which relates to matters of right legislation, shall for the duration of the validity of these laws not require the consent of legislative authorities. The Reich government shall enact the legislation necessary to implement these agreements. Those who do not speak politically, it now means Hitler's cabinet of all his yes men can make whatever the fuck decision they want. They not have to consult the Reichstag, they don't have to consult the president. They can do now whatever they want and no one can stop them.
And can I just interject? I think one of the qualms people have with what President Trump's doing at the moment is that we don't really know if it's constitutional or not, because the Constitution is so ambiguous, and obviously it's entrenched, but it doesn't really set out those clear parameters of the relationship between the President, the Supreme Court, and the Congress, and sort of what kind of levels of power they should have in relation. Should they be of equal leveling, or should one supersede the other? And that's one of the problems with constitutions. Sometimes they can be derogated from. I think we're going to talk about that later the executive.
Then now they can do whatever the fuck they want. The Nazis, all the political opponents are now in concentration camps. They have suspended habeas corpus, suspended freedom of speech. No one can say what they want. And then the Nazis, they enact this 3-sentence long act. and it's the end of democracy in Germany. These are the exact words of the act, word for word. This is the whole thing. The Reich government has passed the following law, which is hereby promulgated. The National Socialist German Workers' Party, which are the Nazis, is the only...
They weren't really socialist.
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely not. The National Socialist German Workers' Party is the only political party in Germany. Anyone who undertakes to maintain the organizational cohesion of another party or to form a new political party shall be sentenced to imprisonment for up to 3 years or jailed from 6 months to 3 years unless the act is punishable with a higher penalty by other regulations. Then he holds an election, heavy quotes, in September 1933, and there is one question. Do you like the Nazis or do you not? It's that simple.
And this 92%. Is actually a contention a lot of people have with referendums, that they are often employed by dictators and autocratic leaders to simply legitimise and ratify and institutionalise their. The problem was
with the Anschluss, which is the fancy German word for the annexation of Austria. The annexation of Austria in 1938. There was a referendum held, and basically Nazis were like, "Oh look, referendum! 90% of the Austrians all want to be part of Germany." But the problem was, it was not a secret election. It was not a fair election. In reality, scholars suggest that if it was a secret election where you didn't have to state who you were on the ballot, the reality would have been 70% against annexation. So then eventually it just goes from it devolves from there. Democracy dies. Night of Long Knives. They purge the SA of all political dissent because they believe that Rom was going behind the Nazis' back to try and set up his own army and overthrow the Nazis. He's an open homosexual in a very conservative Germany. That wasn't allowed. Hindenburg said, "You got to put a stop to this guy," and then Hitler just purges him. About a month later, Hindenburg dies. But before he dies, they end up passing a law. Basically, if the president dies, the president's powers and the chancellor's powers become one. Thus, Hitler then becomes Germany's Führer, and democracy dies. Simple as. Yeah. Anyway, let's get on to the relevant current politics. So, our first massive thing, we got Donald Trump's first 2 weeks in office. So the first
a lot's happened. If people are versed in politics watching listening to this, a lot of shit's
I wanna just go through the list. We're gonna go through the list and we're gonna pick out 5.
How long do we have?
But no, we're just gonna state everything that happened on the list.
It's quite an indefinite list.
And then we're gonna pick out 5 and we're gonna discuss them. So, the first one, there was a sermon by Bishop Marion Edgar Budd. Is that how you say that? The Bishop Budd, I think. She made a sermon basically saying, "Hey, let's not be mean to LGBTQ people and migrants." Then there's the Palestinian displacement, or as the Guardians called it, ethnic cleansing.
Oh yeah, the beautiful Riviera.
Well, we're gonna get onto it. Then there's his beef. Then there's his beef with Colombia. Then there's the state suing Trump over his birthright decree. Then there's the call with Starmer, which is more to do with his Greenland plans. The withdrawal from the World Health Organization, as well as the withdrawal from the UN Human Rights Council. His visits to California and the wildfires. The plane crash response. His comparisons that he wants to rebuild the Gilded Age. His tariffs on Canada, Mexico, EU, and China. Musk's shutdown of US aid. $1 billion in arms to Israel. He's cut funding to the Palestinian Relief Organization, UNRWA. Elimination of the Department of Education. He's attempting that. He may get impeached for federal, Medicaid, and international funding cuts. Military aid withdrawal from Ukraine. Deporting pro-Palestinian legal migrants. Defunding schools that promote critical race theory and gender ideology, and these immigration detention camps at Guantanamo Bay.
Can I just interject as well? So, I don't know if you added this. Ending anti-Christian bias.
I did not see that.
Banning trans athletes from women's sports.
I did see that.
Ending UNRWA funding. Implementing tariffs on imports from Mexico, China, and Canada.
Yeah, I said that, yeah.
Migrant detention, yeah.
The first thing I want to talk about is these fucking tariffs, because they're ridiculous. Right? So, for those non-economic students among you, which includes myself, This is basically how a tariff works, right? When a product is imported from another country, the company importing the product will pay a tax to the US government. So let's say I own a car dealership in the United States. I want to buy a Volkswagen from Germany for...
Other brands are available.
Yeah. I say I want to buy a Volkswagen from Germany for $10,000, right? I would then have to... If I import that Volkswagen for $10,000, and there's a 25% tariff on EU imports, I would then have to pay $2,500 to the US government, right? So then the car
Which is going to hence deter you from buying that.
Yeah. So now the car dealership is now paying more money in order to import a foreign car, so we'll end up selling American cars. The thesis is the thesis of tariffs is to try and bring more domestic industry into the United States. The problem is
the problem with tariffs is it's predicated on the fact that it's so circumstantial. It's based upon the fact that those companies will then move their companies to America. And that's not always what will happen, because often there's other avenues they can take. And there's other countries that will have less restrictive regulations and lower taxes, for example. So they're not always going to go to America.
Yeah, no. So then the problem is now the consumers. The consumers are the main ones who suffer, because now they have less choices in cars. For example, with the Volkswagen situation, because respectfully, most American company cars are complete shit. So other than Ford.
And the problem is, as well, this unilaterally affects all parts of industry. It's not that one myopic industry. Because it's such a, especially the automobile industry, it employs so many people.
Yeah.
And covers a vast array of industry that it has huge ramifications.
So basically, so now the customer has a limited choice in buying cars. Domestic prices will often go up too, as now there is a higher demand for that product. So, for example, Trump, he imposed a tariff in his first term on washing machines. Imposed a tariff on washing machines. Then not only did the prices of the foreign washing machines go up, so did the price of domestic washing machines. And by proxy, dryers, the price of dryers also went up. So you're getting a washing machine, you're getting a dryer too. So the price of both washing machines and dryers went up. Both industries were affected by these tariffs.
Though it did actually create jobs. I think it was something.
Yeah, it did make jobs.
4,000.
It made a few jobs, but ultimately at what cost?
Comparatively, what cost? Obviously, it was a detriment. Obviously, there's people who could find those jobs. Yeah, it's beneficial to them, but holistically for the whole of America, they're going to have to suffer the consequences.
Yeah, exactly. So then, fundamentally, they protect incredibly specific industries, but hurt consumers wanting to purchase an imported product. And tariffs are most often used to try and change a country's behaviour. So the way that Donald Trump is trying to use these tariffs against Canada and Mexico...
aren't necessarily economic. The approach, the doctrine he's taken this time, isn't one really of economy. It's deterring the cultural and social policies of other. Yeah.
The two main tariffs are Canada and Mexico. Those are the two main ones. He's put 25% tariffs on both, which I want to point out is
10% on China.
That's higher than he's putting on China. I want to point that out. Canada and Mexico. The Trump's issue with them is he's saying there's a lot of drugs, specifically this new one on the scene called fentanyl, coming into the United States from the Canadian border and the Mexican border. The Mexican border...
That's also a problem with China as well, because of the CCP have been complicit in letting the flow of fentanyl to the US.
So then the issue is then... Small problem. First of all, the Canadian economy isn't doing too hot. And the only reason they were staying on top during the Biden administration was because there was the free trade agreement, which I want to get onto that in a second.
I think it's weird that Biden condemns Trump and slanders Trump because of these.
I want to go into the free trade agreement.
But a lot of the tariffs that he did actually keep for quite a large period of his tenure.
But then the issue is then, the main issue is that Trump says is there's too much fentanyl coming in through Canada. But I think it's something like 1% of all fentanyl coming to the United States comes from Canada. Like, it's a fraction of an amount. And then Canada...
fact checked, obviously.
Canada then responded by implementing their own 25% tariffs. And then they said they were gonna. They now have their. I think they have a fentanyl czar or something. They now have a guy who's controlling all the fentanyl. Specifically, his job is to manage fentanyl, and they're putting more troops on the border. And Mexico is also putting more troops on the border. But as far as I'm aware, I don't. This isn't true. I'll gladly concede, but there's a rumor going around that we're going to do that anyway, without the tariffs. So, and Donald Trump has proclaimed this as his great victory for MAGA Republicans. That's something that the Canadians and the Mexicans might have been doing anyway. There's this coercion method, allegedly, hasn't worked because we're just gonna do it anyway. It's not done anything. Like, it's a bit strange. If they were planning on doing it anyway, it's a bit peculiar. No, but I just thought it was really weird.
Yeah.
So then we'll move on to one thing I really want to talk about is this idea that Trump has for the Gaza Strip. Right, we talked about this last time on the podcast. Gaza Strip's been absolutely decimated by war. 40,000 people have died, and it's an absolute humanitarian disaster over there. People are moving up. People are moving back up to northern Gaza. Except Benjamin Netanyahu was the first person to visit the United States under the Trump administration, the first foreign national, the first foreign leader to visit the United States. And Trump had some very choice words, didn't he, Dominic?
He did.
He had some very choice words. I believe his exact words were, we're going to move them all out, we're going to rebuild it, it's going to be the Riviera of the Middle East.
It's a weirdly utopian and idealistic view from Trump. I'm not sure what kind of choice the Palestinians have in this.
So he's planning...
are they going to vote?
I don't know, but his plan is he wants to move 2 million Gazans who live in Gaza. It's the most densely concentrated place on the planet, right? He's going to split them between Jordan and Egypt. Then he's going to rebuild it like some coastal billionaire Florida type resort. And
the problem is with that as well, all you're going to do is actually radicalise a lot of people. People will defect to
radicalisation.
It'll actually just exacerbate terrorism.
First of all,
you have to deal with the issue of Hamas, which not all Palestinians are complicit in. Not all Palestinians are supporters of Hamas, who are a terrorist organisation. You have to be able to deal with that internally rather than...
Yeah.
And we've seen it in the Iraq War.
Yeah.
And Afghanistan.
Like literally, the fact they kept bombing
when
stuff.
Other countries try and intervene, it often antagonises the situation.
Exactly, and then the problem is not only will it antagonise people. For example, in Afghanistan, for example, they basically got rid of the Taliban in Afghanistan by about 2002. But the fact they kept on bombing it basically brought the Taliban back from Pakistan. But then the issue is not only is it going to antagonise Hamas, it's just ethnic cleansing. Plain simple, this is ethnic cleansing. You are forcibly displacing a group of people who've lived there their entire lives. Perhaps their families lived there for generations, and you're just picking them up and putting them somewhere else because it's just inconvenient to you. It's giving Netanyahu exactly what he fucking wants. It's exactly what he wants. And he said, Donald Trump didn't even say it was going to be owned by Israel. He said it was going to be owned by the US. He said it's going to be a US-owned territory.
The thing is, realistically, he's not going to be able to do this. There's no way he's actually going to be able to promulgate it. The thing is, I think it's really just to exemplify that he's standing with Israel and that the US are going to support Israel.
I thought that was pretty clear. That was pretty clear under Biden. That was relatively clear under Biden, even though he was sending humanitarian aid to Gaza.
I was
still very clear under Biden. He was selling arms. He was doing all that shit, right? But at no point did I hear Biden say, "I'm gonna own Gaza and displace 2 million people." It's ridiculous. And then there were, there's one moment.
That's the one thing that's so incongruent about Trump's politics and the doctrine in which he ran on. That he ran on a peace ticket. He ran on the fact that he was going to stop the war in Ukraine, and this seems like a complete derogation from that, frankly.
And the Bernie Sanders, my goat Bernie, he said this. He said, if this is Trump's peace policy, I really fear his war policy. This is what he's doing in times of peace. forcibly displacing 2 million people, putting them onto developing countries like Egypt and Jordan. Jordan said, if this Palestinian plan goes through, they will declare war on Israel. Simple as. Right? And they're just going to move them. They're just going to move them. If that's a peace policy, in times of relative peace in the United States.
How do you move them? Like, they imagine like a big net or something?
I think that's what he's thinking. He's like a big baby.
All over to Jordan.
He has like a big baby. I'm going to assume that's what he thinks it is. But it's like, it's just insane. It's an insane postulation for the bastion. It's the same thing for someone who's meant to be the bastion of the free world and liberty and democracy, saying, oh yeah, people lived here for generations, just fucking move them, get rid of them, tell them to fuck off. It's ridiculous. It's insane. And then this has received international condemnation. France has gone against this. Germany's gone against this. The UK's gone against this. Most countries other than Israel and the United States, who, by the way, I want to point out that the US is the only one who is attempting to sanction the ICC for their arrest warrant on Netanyahu. One of the only few countries who did not recognize Palestine as a state in a UN vote. Those are the only two countries that are going, yeah, it's a fantastic idea, make it Riviera.
I mean, to me, it seems so sporadic and so incoherent. I feel like he's just had some kind of intrusive thought about it and just decided to play on that way.
Alistair Campbell was talking about this. Alistair Campbell, he was like, Trump's like politics is a bit like ADHD. He just thinks of one thing, and then where it doesn't work out, it's like, oh, move on to something else. It's like, oh, Greenland hasn't worked out. Canada, oh, hasn't worked out. Oh, Mexico, hasn't worked out. Oh, EU hasn't worked out. Gaza, we'll go with this for now, right? He just moves around to stuff like a child with ADHD. It's like just all over the place. It's ridiculous. And
I would like to know the political optics of this. I think it's quite hard to ascertain this at the time. At this time, I don't know what his plans with this are. I don't know if he wants to actually truly enact this, or that there's something else at play. And I think we need to see.
It's ridiculous.
In the long term, what's going to happen.
Yeah, but anyway, I want to talk about the call he had with Keir Starmer. Now,
he's a great guy.
Donald Trump he's been relatively lenient on Starmer so far, considering they're supposedly very different views.
They're philosophically and ideologically contravenous.
Yeah. So I want to read what it says on the government's website. So this is according to the UK government. They said. The Prime Minister spoke to President Trump today. This is from January 26th. President Trump opened by sending his condolences to the Prime Minister on the loss of his brother. The Prime Minister thanked President Trump for his kind words and congratulated him on his inauguration. The Prime Minister paid tribute to the President's role in securing the landmark ceasefire and hostage deal in Gaza. The President welcomed the release of Emily Damari and sent his best wishes to her family and discussed the importance of working together on working for security in the Middle East. They also discussed trade and the economy, the Prime Minister setting out how they were going to deregulating to boost growth. The two stressed the importance of the close and warm ties between the UK and the US, and the President spoke of his respect and affection for the royal family. They agreed to meet soon and look forward to further discussions then. Right, there's a somewhat of a plot hole here, right? And I think I figured it out why it's being filled. So before this, Donald Trump, he was relatively opposed to Keir Starmer. It was at a time where he wasn't sure he was going to win, because it was a very close election, remember? A very close election. And it was relatively like, I don't know if I'm going to win this. Can I just chat shit about Keir Starmer and get away with it? And he chatted a little bit of shit here and there. He said he was a big fan of Nigel Farage. He actually ended up at a rally and said, Nigel Farage, he won the elections in the UK. Big wins in the UK.
Bigly wins.
Yeah.
Bigly wins.
And he tried to chat a little bit of shit. But I believe it was partially because of the Chagos deal. Because many suspect that Keir Starmer was attempting to rush the Chagos deal out before Trump came into office. Because Keir Starmer was on the assumption that Trump wouldn't go ahead with it. But then the issue is then now, with his plans with Greenland that he's been waffling on about, now he's in a situation where there's an old law where if the United States wants to take Greenland, this is, I think, before World War One. This rule was put into place when William Howard Taft was president. If the United States wants Greenland, and Denmark concedes and says, "Fine, you can have it," Denmark has to go to Britain first I'd go, hey, Britain, listen, do you want this before I give it to the United States? And if Britain says no, then the US can make a bid. Right. So now I believe what's happened here is Trump's now trying to cozy up to Keir Starmer to try and get him to give him Greenland.
But I think it's also about he wants to render Starmer more receptive to his ideology in general. Obviously, he's only got a 4-year term. He's going to be rendered a lame duck.
Well, that depends if this third term bill
I don't think it will. But basically, he wants this sort of his doctrine, and especially I think his social and cultural policies to be adopted internationally. I think is the way. And Starmer can easily be swayed.
See, the thing is that Trump, he's obviously against economic globalism, but I think him and Musk are both ideological globalists, if that makes any sense. But yeah, that's all we are going to say. That's my hypothesis on why he's all of a sudden getting along really well with Keir Starmer because of Denmark. But then
Keir Starmer, who's foreign secretary, called Trump a neo-Nazi.
Oh god, I cannot stress. I said this in the last podcast. I don't like David Lammy. He's probably actually my least favorite person in that cabinet. Ed Davey, I saw him at the PMQs about a couple of weeks ago, and Ed Davey was bringing up this really interesting point. It's like, hey, how about this with Donald Trump and this like that? And David Lammy just sneered at him like, oh, what a ludicrous suggestion. Like, fuck off. Like, you're such a hypocrite when Russia attacks Ukraine on Christmas, you condemn that. It's outrageous. But when Israel bombs Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus Christ, on Christmas, there is not a peep from you. I hate David Lammy so much. It's an open letter to David Lammy. I fucking hate you. But no, that's what we have to say on that. Also, his military withdrawal from Ukraine. I don't want to touch on this because I want to speak on the history of the war with Ukraine, right? So basically, with Ukraine was initially a part of the Russian Empire, from the 19th century. It briefly gained independence in the 1920s when the Russian Empire collapsed during the Russian Revolution. And then eventually, after the Russian Civil War was finished, it got re-annexed into the USSR. After World War II, Eastern Bloc develops. On the other side, you got NATO, and these two ideologies are competing with each other for dominance over Europe, essentially. Then in the late 1980s, beginning with the Soviet-Afghan War and the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Eastern Bloc eventually collapses, and then the USSR dissolves in 1991. Ukraine gains an independence, and then it's a bit confusing about what happens next because no one can really come to an agreement as to why Vladimir Putin did what he did. Some people say it's because of the collapse of the USSR, and Vladimir Putin viewed that as a tragedy. Vladimir Putin can't even sit its own story. Sometimes it's because of neo-Nazis, sometimes it's because of national security. But
sometimes he'll perpetuate this notion that Russia has this historical claim to Ukraine. It'll go back to like the 1200s.
Yeah, if you see this,
like
if you see the interview with Tucker Carlson, interview Tucker Carlson, he was just like, okay, so can you explain this? And Vladimir Putin consistently, every time question asked, like, okay, Tucker, we need a little bit of context here. And he goes back to like 800 AD or some shit. It's ridiculous. But then no one really knows why he does this. I want to dispel the myth that this is a NATO sob story. There is a myth going around that the United States promised to not expand NATO eastward, and then they betrayed their promise. And now the US and Russia is now building a stronger defense against NATO, who are illegally expanding into eastern territory. No such promise was made. There was a circulation in the Bush administration, the first Bush administration under George Sr. There was a circulation of it, but it never went anywhere. But Gorbachev left with an implicit agreement that NATO wouldn't expand eastward somehow. It was never actually put forward as an idea that NATO would not expand eastward. And then Bill Clinton, he was quite chummy with Russia, and then Russia tries to go into Georgia, goes into Crimea and Donetsk, and then relationships end up obviously souring because of that. And it's like, then he ended up, Belarus is now Putin's bitch, essentially. They helped with the invasion of Ukraine. They attacked from the north while Russia attacked from the east. And now Ukraine is now being fully invaded as of February 2022. Again, no one really knows why, but I do want to dispel the myth that it's a decree that NATO said they wouldn't expand eastward, because that's just a load of bullshit. So, no, yeah, it's just a little bit, it's just like, but Ukraine has largely received economic and military funding from the West, mainly with the US. The UK has been sending there to train over soldiers and stuff like that. Whereas
in the US sent something like 400 billion.
Oh, it's like insane amounts.
Yeah.
No, it's 175 billion. But Volodymyr Zelensky, he recently made a public statement. He only received 77 billion. He said, "I have no idea where this money's gone." Because he said, everyone said, US has given 175 billion to Ukraine, but Volodymyr Zelensky has only received 77 billion. Somehow, nearly $100 billion has vanished into thin air. We don't know where it is. But Russia has also called on North Korea. They sent about 11,000 troops over there. North Korea is vehemently denying that North Korean troops are there, even though Ukraine has POWs who are North Korean. But no, I just want to talk about it just for the history of the war in Ukraine. Yeah. Trump's pulling out military advisors, pulled out 20,000 troops from Eastern Europe, from Europe as well. Yeah. But then I also want to touch on the last thing I want to speak on is what he's doing. The main thing I want to talk about is he's deporting the pro-Palestinian legal migrants. So if anyone expresses a pro-Palestinian sentiment and you have a student visa, anyone who participated in pro-Palestinian protests as a student, your student visa will be revoked.
Is this specifically violent or peaceful protests?
He just said Palestinian protests. If you participated in them, you will get your student visa.
And what kind
revoked.
Are we talking pro-Hamas or just pro-free?
Thing is, I know
because you got to 7 days.
He has said pro-Hamas, but the way Trump uses words, the way he's done this historically in the past, I think when he says pro-Hamas, he does just mean pro-Palestine. If someone is supporting a terrorist organization and have a student, if someone is supporting a terrorist organization there and they're in this country illegally or undocumented or on a student visa, then obviously there shouldn't be a. But
if they're subscribed to jihadi value, it depends what angle they're coming.
But then there's a difference between that and just expressing a pro-Palestinian sentiment and having your student visa revoked, which is incredibly different. Then he's also defunding schools that promote critical race theory. For those of you not aware, it's a thing that people on the right have made up to get mad at. It's this theory that basically in schools they're teaching kids to hate white people, when in actuality it's just they're teaching racism and racism is bad. That's what they're saying. You'll rarely ever find a school that actually is going, white people suck and we shall hate white people shall always be guilty for everything they've ever done. But then also there's this gender ideology thing, and he's acting like they're teaching kids to be trans or to be gay, and that's just not a thing. And then he's also, with these immigration detention camps at Guantanamo Bay, he's trying to put 30,000 illegal or undocumented migrants. I want to make a distinction between illegal and undocumented. Illegal migrants are people who have crossed the border illegally, gone through that whole process. You have to get on a boat, you have to get on a very dangerous train, the whole thing. But then there's the undocumented migrants, who more often than not have come into this country legally. Then they have a work visa, and then for reasons out of their control, their work visa is taken away or expires. And a lot of undocumented migrants are often applying for citizenship in the United States. So, and then they're being picked up by the ICE, different story. But they're putting 30,000 of these illegal and undocumented migrants in detention camps at Guantanamo Bay. I want to point out that Guantanamo Bay's maximum capacity that it ever had was in the mid-2000s, when it was housing 780 terrorists or terrorist suspects, right? And he's planning to put 30,000 people there. That's like, I'm sure the conditions in there will be absolutely fantastic. But my question is: are these the first footsteps towards actual fascism? Because I wanna point out this thing. In the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., there is this poster, and it says, early warning signs of fascism, and it has a list. I think about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 points that it claims is an early warning sign of fascism. I want to go through them. The first one is powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights, identification of enemies as a unifying cause, supremacy of the military, rampant sexism, controlled mass media, obsession with national security, religion and government intertwined, corporate power projected, labour power suppressed, disdain for intellectuals and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, rampant cronyism and corruption, and fraudulent elections. Now, in my opinion, Trump has done all of those to an extent. In my opinion. So he's very openly nationalist. He says that America's the greatest country in the world, should always be the greatest country in the world.
Fact, so have a lot of presidents.
No, but there's a difference.
Yeah,
they've
always.
I want to make the distinction between nationalism and patriotism. Patriotism is being proud of your country. Nationalism is the belief that your country is the best country, and oftentimes nationalism does come at the detriment of other nations. So your country should be better, no matter whatever other
people do have an inherent proclivity to want to not preserve their own country, but to prioritise their needs over others. That's just inherent to.
Yeah, JD Vance was talking about this, and he got into beef with Rory Stewart over it. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's fucking hilarious. But then Trump is also rolled back some civil rights and human rights policies. So, for example, here in 2017, signed an executive order to discriminate against Muslims coming into the United States, on travel, and discriminate against refugees. He's also issued statements for his resolution under Congressional Review Act to overturn Department of Education's accountability rule that clarifies states' obligations under Every Student Succeeds Act. The Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights opposes resolution, right? And there's a lot of stuff he's done that fundamentally is in violation of some human and civil rights. Trump and Musk have both openly spoken about the enemy within, whether they be Democrats or Marxists or immigrants.
That's also, I don't think that's necessarily mutually exclusive to Trump, because you saw in the run up to the 2016 presidential election, Obama called all Republicans deplorables.
Obviously, it's not good, but then there's the actual the enemy within rhetoric. It's a bit strange. Then he's also with the military thing. He's mobilized military at the border, big military, like I remember I spoke about this on the first podcast or the second one. No, the second one. It was these big what are they called? Escape my mind. But they're big fucking planes. The rampant sexism is obviously grabbing by the pussy, without a doubt. Then he doesn't control the mass media exactly, but he has since 2016 he has sowed such a massive distrust into other news outlets like CNN and MSNBC, just to make Republicans go, well, that's fake news.
They are so overtly biased. I mean, you saw in the presidential debate they fact checked Trump 4 times, which they should rightly so, but they didn't fact check Kamala once. So,
yeah, I think the thing is again, it's on the scale where she didn't tell a lie, so obviously untrue. Obviously, there are U.S. troops overseas. I was that's a bit weird that she said that. But obviously, I didn't laugh when she said that. I laughed when he said they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats in Springfield. It's just a different scale of lies. And then there's also
no, but I think it was on the part of the administratives at these legacy news companies that they intentionally didn't fact check her because they wanted to disparage Trump.
It's like that episode of Smiling Friends where it's the one where Mr. Frog runs for president. Yeah. And it's Mr. Frog, why are you so evil? Time's up, no more time. President Gimbal, why are you so amazing? You have all the time you want to respond. And then obviously he loves his national security, Donald Trump. That's the kind of a given. Then Trump has often spoken about Christians, and one of his main target audience is the Christians. He said 87% or something like that.
It's something like that.
Yeah. And then obviously there's massive tax cuts for the wealthy and the elite, and the three richest men in the world, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk, front row seats above his cabinet in the inauguration. He's weakened unions a lot. He's weakened union power and the labour force. He's often discredited climate scientists, quite often. And J.D. Vance has called... J.D. Vance, he was at a rally and he called professors the enemy. He's also big on crime, with the corruption of all the files they found at Mar-a-Lago and stuff like that. And then with the fraudulent elections, he hasn't done one that we know of. But the election that he didn't win, he called fraudulent, called it to be recounted, even though the evidence that they did have was total bullshit. The evidence they had that it was rigged was a load of bollocks. Okay, so that's just all I want to speak about. I think I really hope that America isn't going to send into fascism. But he has openly spoken about how great the Gilded Age was and about how great President McKinley was. This is the closest America's actually gotten to fascism ever, with President McKinley. And I don't think he will dissolve democracy, but he might, with this third term bill, he might bypass the original rules that he's trying to get through.
I don't think realistically that's going to get passed though, because Congress fundamentally is predicated on the idea that they're trying to please the folks back home. There's always an impending election. There's always a looming election. So they never really... There has been an increase in party unity votes, but they tend to vote along individual conscience and a delegate model of voting, as opposed to consistently aligning themselves with the president. So I think Congress would largely oppose that. I mean, obviously there has been an insurgence of the Tea Party caucus, which if people don't know, was founded pretty much in the birth of the ACA, so Obamacare, and against big government in general and the more intravenous government, and has seen quite a large uprising in the Republican Party because they have this caucus and primary system. Members, there can be such discrepancies in ideology within the same party. Fundamentally, they're not really one cohesive party. The two major parties in US, they're an amalgamation of different coalitions, and that's why you see such big factions in America. So that's definitely supported Trump, but I don't know if they have such a sweeping majority in Congress to actually allow him to extend his term to a third term.
Yeah. So anyway, finally, let's get on to something that isn't Donald fucking Trump. Yay! Woo! We fucking
We're gonna have to call this episode the MAGA episode and
everything else.
Yeah.
So our first, I wanted to go a bit more international with this one. Syria. Syria is our first topic. So Syria, the Syrian government has requested the return of Bashar al-Assad. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with the Syrian Civil War.
I'm not too versed.
Okay, so I'm going to assume all listeners aren't either. So it all begins with the Arab Spring, which are these protests by a bunch of young people all across the Middle East against all these like autocratic regimes in the Middle East. And a bunch of peaceful protests in Syria are eventually shot at by Bashar al-Assad's forces. Bashar al-Assad, he is the dictator. He was the dictator of Syria. It's like a family legacy kind of thing. So his dad was dictator before he was. His dad either retired or died. Bashar al-Assad, who was operating in London as an ophthalmologist, he came back to Syria to rule the country. Then the protesters, they come back. They start shooting back at the Syrian army. Eventually, the protesters then become the Free Syrian Army, and the uprising eventually turns into a civil war. Now, Assad, he intentionally releases a bunch of jihadists and Islamistic extremists from prison in order to sow the rebellion with Islamist extremism in order to try and stop the backing of foreign powers like the UK. So the UK, because then everyone's going to go, look at this, the UK is backing extremists, can't allow this. So then Al-Qaeda, sets up a Syrian branch within the rebellion. Then Kurds, ethnic Kurds, they officially secede in the north of Syria. So Iran then backs Assad. They send ground troops and supplies. The Gulf states then begin to funnel even more supplies. So the Gulf states, that's Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, I think as well. Qatar. They start sending in stuff through Jordan. Through Jordan. Yeah, through Jordan. They're sending stuff through Jordan into the rebellion. Then Obama requests that the CIA train the rebels, but then the program is stalled. US diplomats are requesting that the Gulf states stop funding the rebels because of the Islamist extremism that Bashar al-Assad intentionally put there. These requests are obviously ignored. Then Bashar al-Assad, he uses chemical weapons against his own people, and then it provokes an international condemnation from everybody. Obama threatens military action. The CIA eventually begins to train troops, becoming official participants in the war. The US is now official member of this war, right? So now, there is an incredibly Islamist extremist faction in the rebellion, and it breaks, and they form ISIS, which is the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. So they break, and ISIS, I'm not quite sure why, they're fighting the two groups of rebels. They are not fighting Assad. So ISIS are fighting the Kurds, and the rebels, who are both fighting Assad. Assad's fighting all three of them. So we've got this fucking crazy web of fighting, right? So then, Obama begins to attack ISIS. Obama is now prioritizing ISIS over prioritizing Assad. So the Pentagon attempts to set up a program to train even more rebels, but it's only the rebels that will commit to fighting ISIS over fighting Assad, right? So then Turkey bombs the Kurds, where it does not bomb ISIS. Then Russia begins to aid on the side of Assad. So we've got four factions. We've got Assad. He's being backed by Iran. He's being backed by Hezbollah, who's Iran's paramilitary group in Lebanon. And Russia, he is from the Ba'ath Party of Syria. The Ba'ath Party is like this whole thing across most Middle Eastern states. Saddam Hussein was a part of it. And then we've got ISIS. ISIS is backed by no one. Everyone hates ISIS. Fuck ISIS. The Kurds are backed by the United States. And the rebels are also backed by the United States, Gulf countries, Jordan, and Turkey. Right? So then, eventually, Trump is elected. Trump is relatively pro-Assad. He's going, we're going to keep out the war, we're not going to get involved. Then Assad uses chemical weapons on his own people again. Trump has to act. He is the first person to ever actually intentionally order an airstrike on Assad. He survives. But then Al-Qaeda breaks off ties with the rebels. Then the rebels now led by a former Al-Qaeda commander. I forget his name. Oh, what's his name? Leader of Syria. Not Bashar. No, the new guy. What's his name? Oh, fuck. Here he is. Ahmed al-Shara. He's a former Al-Qaeda commander, but he's become a lot more liberal. He advocates for freedom of women, freedom of religion, stuff like that. And he is now head of the Syrian rebellion. Then in December, the rebels launch a massive offensive and a new assault to recapture Damascus. And Assad has fled to Moscow with his tail between his legs. He may have been poisoned. We don't know. Bashar al-Assad might have been poisoned because he was hospitalized recently. So
suspicious.
So very suspicious. So then, that's all I want. So I want to talk about the war in Syria. Now Musk with the AFD. Did you see this rally? Or
I did see the rally.
Did you watch the whole thing? What did he have to say? I remember I saw clips of him talking about restoring German national pride.
Yeah, I think if you want to say the good understanding of this AFD rally, you gotta watch the whole thing. Now, basically, he was perpetuating that Germans, and specifically German kids, should not be guilty of the atrocities
of the Holocaust.
And I think that's true. And I think everyone could unanimously agree with that that they bore no responsibility and they shouldn't. Not that it shouldn't be taught the Holocaust. Of course, it needs to be an entrenched part of. It's currently a part of. So they don't really learn it in history. They learn it in citizenship. Obviously, that's important, but not to impose any responsibility on them, because obviously how in
it's
any
the same
way did
kind
they
of the similar way that
facilitate
we teach like the British Empire.
Yeah.
Like it's like this thing happened, it's bad.
It's not like we've enabled that.
Yeah. Which I don't fundamentally disagree with, but it's just a lot of Elon Musk's actions.
My problem with is the fact that he's supporting the AFD.
Yeah, the AFD. So for those who aren't familiar with so those who aren't familiar with what's going on in Germany right now, there's a little bit of a crisis going on within the government. So Olaf Scholz, who's the head of the SPD, see they're still around, so the Social Democratic Party, they fired their finance minister, who is also the leader of the Free Democratic Party, the FDP. So there's a three-way coalition going on between the SPD, the FPD, and the Greens. They're forming a three-way coalition. Now the FDP has split from this coalition, and now the SDP and the Greens are now in a minority government. So Olaf Scholz has called a vote of confidence in his government. This vote of confidence has failed, so now he's led to a snap election. It was meant to be an election in September of this year, but he's pulled it forward to February. Right. So the main people currently, the main candidates, there's about 5 of them. The main candidates are Olaf Scholz. He's the leader of the SPD. He's the current chancellor. He currently has 207 seats in the Bundestag, which is the modern version of the Reichstag, and he is third in polling. He got about 19% support on YouGov. So he's become like third. Friedrich Merz, who is the leader of the Christian Democratic Union. They're centre-right conservative. Think a bit like the Tories in British government. They're conservative. They're Christian. They're currently first in polling. They're 28% on YouGov. They are opposed to the AFD, and they don't like. And Friedrich Merz is not a big fan of Angela Merkel, who was the previous chancellor under the CDU. And they currently have 196 seats in the Bundestag. Then you have Robert Habeck with the Greens. They are centre-left as well. They currently have 117 seats in the Bundestag, and they're fourth in polling, about 15% on YouGov. Christian Lindner, who's the FDP and the former finance minister, he currently has, they're like a liberal party. They currently have 89 seats in the Bundestag. They're sixth in polling, 4% on YouGov. And then we have Alice Weidel. Now, Alice Weidel is the leader of the AFD, which is the Alternative for Deutschland. Wikipedia describes them as far-right, populist, and anti-immigration. This is not just like anti-illegal immigration, like the same way Nigel Farage is and Donald Trump is. This is just like multiculturalism is a failure, and we should not allow anyone into this country unless they're white. And it's like, so they're very popular in the former communist East. So basically, it kind of proved to me that like a lot of racism comes from economic downturn, because basically in the aftermath of World War II, Stalin was extracting a lot of resources from East Germany in order to pay their war debt, which was the East German economy really fucking struggling, and it still has an impact to this day. And in the 2024 European parliamentary elections, the AFD absolutely swept the East. It was literally like the CDU was in former West Germany. The AFD was in the former East. It was insane. It was an absolutely mental fucking map, right? They're second in polling. They are 19% on YouGov, and they are very, very strong proponents of German nationalism. Like not just like being proud of your country. So there's like proper German nationalism.
I mean, the rhetoric they use strongly alludes to that of.
It's like, I mean,
they're constantly talking about like the fatherland and regaining like the German pride and stuff like that.
And then there's also there was room like anti-Semitism in the party. That was from their old leader. I think they got rid of him. but Alice Weidel, I'm not sure if she's actually spoken about the anti-Semitism or condemned it. Jews are scared if the AfD gets into power, right? So this was the standing until about a week ago, when the CDU, all of a sudden, they want to close Germany's borders, and they want to turn away asylum seekers, which is against EU law. I want to point that out. Merz also, he announces a 5-point plan with little to no consultation. It would include a permanent border for Germany and turning everyone away. Again, this is against EU law, right? A symbolic vote was held by Merz on this issue. Merz said, I don't care who votes for this. Anyone can fucking vote. Do you think I give a shit? So the AfD, they show up in droves and vote for this. The AfD is like, yeah, fuck it, let's go, come along. And Merz, he tries to oppose the AfD again, but the AfD doesn't care. They push it through, and they get the votes through. Now, the AfD is in a position where they now control the CDU. Basically, they say, okay, listen, if the SPD wins the election, they're going to form a coalition with the Greens. You are not going to get this immigration plan you want passed. You'll either have to work with us, or you will lose. It's as simple as that. So they are borderline blackmailing Friedrich Merz into working with borderline neo-Nazis. It's like, it's nuts. It's such an insane change of pace. Like, it's mental.
It's very circuitous considering what happened in 1920s Italy and 1930s.
Exactly. It's history. Like, Karl Marx said this. It was like history has a fashion of repeating itself. The second time's a farce, though, and it's like, oh. But that's what I have to say about Germany. I educated myself far too much in German politics for this. But then after Elon Musk went to his AfD rally, did his funny, definitely Roman gesture, he's had a drop in Tesla sales in Europe. 59% drop. It's very clear that Europeans are taking what he did at the rally and his AfD appearance incredibly seriously, because they're like, it is censored on all EU news channels. They actually can't they can't show what Elon Musk did at that rally.
Yeah.
Because it's against law to show a Nazi salute on European television. Right. I think. But then after this, I thought this was a story over and done with. Elon Musk has been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. And it's like, sure, he hasn't started any wars, but what has he done to contribute to peace? He's backed him and he's trying to ethnically cleanse Gaza. That's nuts. That's insane. Next thing I want to talk about, this Chinese chatbot.
Oh, yeah.
So basically, China released this new chatbot.
China!
They released this new chatbot called DeepSeekAI. And it functions very similar to ChatGPT, except it can't tell you about Tiananmen Square. If you go onto DeepSeekAI and you ask what happened in Tiananmen Square in 1989, it goes, let's talk about something else. And you can ask about US war crimes, like, here's a fucking bunch of them. But then this came out, and the stock market, oh my Jesus Mary Mother of Christ, it lost $2 trillion in one day. That's insane. Nvidia lost its stance as the largest tech company in the United States. It lost 17% of its value overnight. Most tech companies took a massive hit. Meta took a hit. Apple took a hit. And it's overall, it's not particularly great. ChatGPT and OpenAI, they've said that they've stolen ChatGPT's model and copied it. But I'm sure they know what it's like now to finally have someone else plagiarize their work instead of plagiarizing everybody else's. Now, new thing happened in Belarus. There was an election, strong words, in Belarus. So, for those who aren't aware, Alexander Lukashenko, I've said earlier in this podcast...
I think an election is a bit of a pejorative term in Belarus.
So, Alexander Lukashenko, he has been in charge of Belarus since the collapse of the Soviet Union. This is now his 7th term running as president, right? So, Lukashenko is essentially, he's Putin's bitch. He does anything that Putin wants him to do. And Lukashenko, he sets these elections. This one journalist asked him about the election. And he said, they asked him, he was like, oh, how do you think the election campaign's going so far? Lukashenko's like, oh, honestly, I've not really been following it that closely with his own campaign.
And funnily enough, he won 87%.
87%. I'd like to congratulate him on absolutely fucking fantastic. Oh, I find really funny though is the last election in Russia, which many suspect was rigged. Vladimir Putin won 88.
It couldn't have been rigged.
He won 88% majority, but Lukashenko won 87%. Kind of shows that because he's Putin's bitch, he can't win a larger majority than he can. So then, basically,
they just had to burn some of the ballots.
All the other candidates, like the campaign was just, Lukashenko's so great. We love Lukashenko. He's amazing. And Lukashenko, he's been arresting political prisoners. Many have said he is the last true European dictator. So it's a strong word for an election.
Should I add, he's won every single presidential election since 1990.
Yeah, since the collapse of the Soviet Union. It's this 7th term. Congratulations, Mr. Lukashenko. Fucking incredible.
I'm just looking on the Wikipedia page here, and it's got like the prospective elections for the future, and it says 2030. Do we know there'll be an election in 2030? That's a bit presumptuous.
This is what these dictators do. Kim Jong-un, there's still elections in North Korea. Strong word.
I'm surprised they're every 5 years.
It's just to like show.
Yeah, it's just to show.
Legitimize. It's just for the headline of Lukashenko wins 7th term. And like, well, obviously not elections. They do this in China. China's a one-party state.
Surely most people can't believe that. I can't see that most people.
No, but there's like people. No, but there's obviously people who aren't that educated in the politics of Belarus, and it's like they'll just see the headline and go, "Oh, good on him." But there's people, like us, who know Lukashenko the littlest bit, and we're like, "Well, it's just he's just basically fucking arresting political opponents. He's just a dictator," and it's like. Yeah, it's a bit mental. Anyway, so anything else you want to talk about? You want to talk about these last 3 things, or are you a bit too tired? There's Heathrow Runway, Brexit, and this thing I just added just now.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Stephen A. Smith.
Oh, this is funny.
I guess I can talk about Heathrow Third Runway.
Heathrow.
So basically, if you guys aren't versed in this, there's been plans to expand it all, but there's been prospects of expanding Heathrow Runway for about 30 years now, and there's been contention between the planners, a lot of environmental activist groups. So there was this one called Plain Stupid, and basically they were opposing the expansion of runway because of the amount of emissions that were going to be.
Yeah. So basically, Heathrow has 2 runways. People have been proposing a third, perchance.
And I think Rachel Reeves is now saying this can be built and operating in a decade's time, which I don't think is feasible.
That's not feasible because I don't think Labour's going to last another decade as a kiss Starmer.
And the problem is, it's so ideologically incongruent and so incoherent, and it is so overtly stupid because all they've been doing these last few months is playing down England. England's in such a deficit. England's in such a calamitous state, and now they're trying to bring some optimism and some sprightliness to England. It's like it doesn't work now. People are going to see through it.
I was also under the impression, didn't Labour previously oppose it under Jeremy Corbyn, or am I mistaken?
They did, I believe.
Yeah, because Labour.
Obviously, this government's going down the line that they want to circumvent all the red tape. They want to derogate from all the obstructions to investment, but my problem is that they've been perpetuating that England's economy, there's no optimism, there's no prospects for England's economy for the last few months.
It's a drinking game.
They're trying to rally some support for this, but they're not going to because they've talked us down for the last.
They've talked us down for the last 6 months, and then they go, "Oh, our economy is such a state. Let's build another fucking runway." How are you going to do that if you don't have money? The thing is if they keep on talking about this £22 billion black hole, which I'm of the personal belief, I don't think it's real. I think
my problem is that he can also find, what was it, 9 billion for the Chagos Islands, but he can't seem to fill this
£20 billion gap,
Yeah.
and it's like he can find money for other things. He keeps saying £20 billion black hole, and it's like multiple economics magazines have asked, "Hey, can you entail the details of this?" And they've either got a response of no, and we're like and as a different magazine asked, and they said we're not quite sure of the details. I don't know which one's worse. If this is either made up or this black hole is real and they don't know where it is. I don't know which one's worse. And it's like, Keir Starmer,
if there is a black hole, it's probably much bigger than 22 billion as well.
No, and it's like sure, the economy did take a hit under the Tories and Liz Truss's horrendous budget.
But you're elected upon a mandate that you're going to change that. You can't just consistently use the last government's fallibilities to justify your actions. You're elected to change that, to make the economy better. What's the point?
Do you regularly watch the PMQs?
Sorry.
Do you regularly watch the PMQs?
I know them.
It's a regular drinking game. I like to play on myself every single time. Keir Starmer says, "Oh, it's the Tories' fault." I like to take a shot, but
you must be leathered by that.
Absolutely, I'm out. I'm so out. It's like it's absolutely ridiculous. It's like he brings them up so much. It's like I can't genuinely just like actually enact some change. Say the change that you're doing, because Labour, the main issue is I'm sure they've done good things. I just don't know what they've done. Because they're so shit at marketing what they have done, like deporting the 16,000 illegal migrants, like stopping these people smuggling gangs, and they're just fucking really shit at it. It's just they're really
really based on those things. They've been quite piecemeal with a lot of.
Yeah, but like there's still
it's not necessarily going to appease those.
There's still good stuff that they have done. There's good stuff that they've done. It's just they're not good at showing it. They're just really shit at showing it. And the good things that they say they're doing, like like this thing where you're saying that we're going to make spiking illegal. That was already illegal! There was already a fucking crime to put a drug in someone else's drink! And oh my god, it's absolutely ridiculous. But no, it's this Heathrow Runway thing, it's not going to come through. It's not going to come through because they keep saying...
Certainly not within Labour's tenure.
Not within Labour's tenure, absolutely not, because the polling's suggesting they're going to lose a majority. They'll still have a majority over Parliament, but it'll be, relatively speaking, a bit of a minority.
It would be a hung Parliament.
It would be a hung Parliament. They'll still have a majority, but it's razor thin. Yeah. It's 6 seats over the Tories, according to the last poll I saw from December. And it's just... It's destined to fail. The Heathrow Runway isn't going to go anywhere. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure if it should, to be honest. Because, okay, well, if they manage to come up with a sustainable fuel plan, hypothetically, I'd probably approve it. But if they can't, then they shouldn't. Simple as. Because the main concern is the environmental concern. Because
I just don't think economically it's going to be that viable.
No, because do you know how many runways JFK Airport has in New York?
I guess 4?
6. JFK Airport has 6 runways, right? And that is like one of the biggest traffics in the world, I believe. JFK Airport. And it's
the notion is that it would actually reduce emissions because planes wouldn't have to be circulating the runway, waiting for 45 minutes before landing.
That's the theory. Then there's also there'll be more planes coming in. Instead of just circling around all the time. And ultimately, it's not going to come. It's not going to happen, realistically. And it's just ridiculous.
They've also... I don't know if they've realised this. I mean, probably not, because they're they're politically illiterate. But it's going to create more division. So Sadiq Khan has already opposed this. It's going to, if they want to present this notion of a unified Labour Party, which wasn't seen under Corbyn, the fact that they will be unanimous in their decisions.
They're not.
Well, you're not. Yeah, they're not.
Yeah, Sadiq Khan is opposing the Heathrow Runway. Andy Burnham's calling for a national inquiry. It's all over the fucking place. No one knows what's going on in Labour. There's no unifying cause.
I think the main problem with Starmer's Labour, one, it's not ideologically
leftist
coherent.
at all.
It's not leftist, but it's also not ideologically coherent. I also think the Labour Party's reconvened too quick. It's almost become a new party, but it's only come into fruition because of weaknesses of the Tory party, and I don't think they're inherent in this political situation that they're realistically probably never going to be able to reconcile.
Yeah, no, Labour's the thing is I said this on election night. I said this is not a Labour victory; it's just a Tory loss. Yeah. It's simple as, because this isn't Labour's biggest victory. It's the second biggest since 1997, but it is the Tories' worst loss ever. It's 121 seats they're hanging on by. And ultimately then, the thing is while Labour is so fractionalised and just trying to sort everything out, the Tories, instead of focusing on conservative economics, they're now trying to team up with Nigel Farage, perpetuate some of the views that him and Elon Musk have been saying. They're trying to team up now. That's the difference.
I think reform, honestly, to agree, helped to get Labour in 2024, because obviously it wasn't advantageous for them to because and it was advantageous to them to actually let Labour implode on themselves. I mean, that's literally what they're doing.
And then this is the same thing with the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats, they gained 62 seats last election. Again, it's the fact is in 2024 election, near every single party gained seats except the Tories. It was a Tory loss. It was not a Labour win. It's simple as that.
Although SNP did tank as well.
Okay, well the SNP lost seats just based on that. But other than the SNP. But next thing I want to talk about.
But who really cares about the SNP?
Realistically, final thing I want to talk about.
To the Scottish people.
Final thing I want to talk about. Brexit.
Oh God.
Brexit. I thought we had very different views on this, but apparently we don't. So, Brexit, almost exactly 5 years ago, Brexit went through under Boris Johnson's deal, and the UK has not, in my opinion...
Though must add, it sort of went through on a false pretense, because the 2016 European Union membership referendum, it only got 51% of people saying yes.
It was such a thin margin.
Actually, they've done recent polls that prove that people would vote to stay.
It's like I reckon between 2016 and 2020, when the thing came out, when Brexit was eventually done, I reckon most of the people that voted yes probably died. Realistically, I think they probably died. So I think the problem is then Brexit was this whole thing. Boris Johnson, his whole platform was we send $350 million to Europe.
Dollars.
Pounds. We send £350 million to Europe. We receive nothing in return. I will take that £350 million and invest it in the NHS. Not only do we not send £350 million to Europe, he did not invest a single penny into NHS afterwards.
Brexit, I think it had the corpus of being something good and possibly bringing more economic viability to Britain. It's not come into fruition properly. It's not been enacted properly, and it's been so piecemeal, Brexit, that it's actually been contrary as to what it was planned to be. I mean, immigration's risen exponentially since Brexit, which is completely contrary to what Brexit was supposed to be about.
Yeah, the main issue that a lot of people took with it was this thing called the European Convention on Human Rights.
And I think it's important to disseminate those things, because parliamentarians actually during the debates,
they believed,
they got no, but they didn't. They did manage to differentiate the ECHR, so the European Convention of Human Rights, which is quasi-codified in our constitution under the HRA 1998, and the jurisdiction EU bodies, so the EU Parliament and the EU courts have over us. They're very different things. The ECHR is a completely separate institution.
Yeah, so basically it was under the pretense that if we left the European Union, the ECHR would also go with it, and the problem was with the ECHR. Thing is, it's not only that. The ECHR was something that the British made. The British wrote the ECHR after World War II in order to introduce stability into Europe after the Second World War.
I think the problem is that so much power has been centralised in these big European countries, and that really we need to devolve that power to the UK, and that someone in Strasbourg shouldn't be adjudicate on what the UK does. It should be up to the UK people. It should either via a referendum or UK judges. I fundamentally do agree with that they don't have the interest of the UK, and they don't have an intrinsic knowledge of UK politics to make that.
I think the thing is, as far as I'm aware, so
judgment.
the European Convention of Human Rights is a part of the Council of Europe, which we are still in. It's not part of the Brexit referendum. But I think it functions similar to a court. So if you have a human rights issue that you feel has been violated, you can
take it up.
It's the Council of Europe. I think a bit like the Supreme Court in the United States, but on a European scale.
Yeah.
So imagine like every single state in the US is like a European country.
Yeah, so you could have
take a
pressure groups, interest groups, or individual actors.
Yeah. So you can take your thing to European Convention of Human. You can take your friends to the Council of Europe. And the thing is I'm not 100% sure as to why we didn't leave before 1998. Probably because it was our thing. We imposed it on the Europeans, so we're not gonna leave it. But the main reason we haven't left since 1998 is peace in Northern Ireland and the Good Friday Agreement fundamentally hinges on the European Convention of Human Rights. If we left the ECHR, the IRA would kick off all over again. We have to make peace in Northern Ireland again. That's why we haven't left since 1998. That's the main reason why we haven't left, as far as I'm aware. So, and it's...
I think if you did, to leave the ECHR, you'd have to supplement that with some kind of British Bill of Rights, which the Tories have fought for.
Which again, it's still a thing that we wrote. So fundamentally, it kind of is a British decree on human rights, isn't it? If it's something that we wrote, there's only one protocol.
I don't think it's necessarily about necessarily the statutes within it. It's the fact that it's how that's been applied by European.
The thing is we've ratified every single protocol. Basically, if you want an amendment to the European Convention of Human Rights, it goes to a protocol system. Think like an amendment in the Constitution, right? But we have only not ratified one protocol, which is the civil imprisonment and free movement and expulsion, Protocol 4. So Article 1 of Protocol 4 prohibits imprisonment of people for inability to fulfill a contract. Article 2 provides for a right to freely move within a country once lawfully there, and for a right to leave any country. Article 3 prohibits the expulsion of nationals and provides for the right of an individual to enter a country of their nationality. Article 4 prohibits the collective expulsion of foreigners. Now, Turkey and the United Kingdom, they both signed this, never ratified it though. Greece and Switzerland, neither signed it nor ratified it. That's the one thing that the British have not taken in on the European Convention of Human Rights. That's the one thing we haven't done. The Protocol 4, the one I just stated. Everything else we've been chill with other than that.
I think the political climate's fundamentally changed since 1998.
That was 2009?
But the political climate's changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
So I mean, we need to make sure it can be better adapted to the needs of our current landscape and politics.
No, but fundamentally, in both mine and your opinions, the economic and immigration impacts of Brexit are undeniably shit. Because the European economy...
Well, we're looking at it in pure metrics.
Because we were in a situation when we did Brexit, we were in a different situation. Because when we did the Brexit referendum, we're in a different situation. We're like, okay, we have the US there, we got Trump, he's a businessman, that's fine. We can still rely on China currently, that's fine. We can leave the EU, we can still have the US and China, and we'll be fine, right? So we hold a Brexit referendum, and then Boris Johnson, he runs the campaign of we're going to stick to what the people want. And by the time 2020 comes around, relations with China fall apart because of the Hong Kong protests. Then the US, then obviously COVID-19 happens, and now we're in another situation where in Trump, he hasn't imposed a tariff on us yet, but he's implying that he might. He said that what
he really wants us to do is disassociate ourselves from the EU, align with the US, and therefore that will mitigate him imposing.
What he's been saying is with his 25% on the EU tariff, he said he got interviews. He was getting on the plane. He said both the EU and Britain are out of line.
They're out of line.
They're out of line. But he said I think we can approach a deal more with the UK
And I think the fact he's willing to approach a deal, again, ties in with Greenland. He's trying to make favour with Keir Starmer, hoping in the attempt that Denmark does cave in and allow the US to get it, that the Britain will also allow the US to have it as well. So I think it's fundamentally, it's a game
There's no feasible way that the British are going to provide substantial opposition against Trump trying to take over. There's not like we can do much, is there?
Yeah, but it'd be so funny. It'd be so funny.
We would get decimated.
What was really funny was when Fox News, with the Greenland thing, they went live in Greenland.
The bastards of truth.
Yeah, they went live in Greenland. They were like, okay, we're going to street interview the people of Greenland, and we're going to see how they feel, who they want to be a part of, Denmark, United States. So they went in, and they started interviewing the people of Greenland, and obviously, every single person they asked told them to fuck off, because they didn't like them. They don't want to be owned by the fucking US. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, an issue like that, an issue of self-determination, they really need some kind of referendum, because say the majority of people in Greenland did want a US takeover, well, they should have their will respected.
Yeah, no, obviously.
If it's
so the main issue is I believe the Greenland Prime Minister said this. The Prime Minister of Greenland, he said, I wouldn't be opposed. The Danish Prime Minister has said, yeah, probably not. All 5 parties in Greenland's parliament have gone, yeah, no. And I think it's something like 80-odd% or something. I saw a poll, wasn't an official referendum though, but there was like a poll and it said about 80-odd% of people from Greenland would rather prefer to be in Denmark than the United States. And the same thing happened with Canada as well, because he's saying, we're going to annex Canada and turn it into 51st state.
The 51st state.
He said that he wouldn't impose tariffs on Canada if it became a 51st state, and the Charles Show is like, just going to fuck off. And the same things happened. And then every single Canadian party as well has told Trump to just get lost. Even the Conservative, Pierre Poilievre, he's told him to get lost as well. And it's just...
butchered that French name.
Oh my god, I don't care. He's French. Right. But then, no.
Right, you should hear his French accent.
Okay, but then... So anyway, that's what we have to say on Brexit. I want to briefly mention this thing, because I thought it was really fucking funny. Stephen A. Smith. Are you familiar with who this man is?
I am not.
Stephen A. Smith, Stephen A. Smith he's an American TV personality. He is a sports presenter. He's mainly works with NBA and ESPN. And he has a podcast, like us. He's like us. Yeah. And he recently hosted on his podcast that he would consider a run for president of the United States. And it's becoming a bit of a movement. There's this gambling website.
Is that like Kanye West trying to run for president?
No. He's even running on a Democratic ticket, like not like okay. Running a Democratic ticket. And on this gambling site where it's like, who do you reckon would be the 2028 Democratic nominee? Stephen A. Smith, last time I checked, he's third. He's 30. He has a 6% chance behind. He's got a chance behind just Gavin Newsom and Josh Shapiro, as far as I'm aware. Yeah. And those are the only 2 opposition that you might have. But then there's no. I briefly want to talk about what we said with the Gilded Age as well. The Gilded Age, right? You're familiar with this?
I'm not.
Basically, there was this era in the late 19th, early 20th century. Basically, there was these people called the robber barons.
Yeah.
They basically had a bunch of fucking money. There was mass poverty, mass like starvation of the poor, and it was a pretty awful time to be alive if you weren't obscenely wealthy, right? And then Teddy Roosevelt comes along and he fixes it all, right? Donald Trump has said that he wants America to be more like that. He said that America was the richest it has ever been during the Gilded Age, between 1883 and 1913. Now, I'm really interested with this because he really wants us to believe that the United States was more wealthy before the mass-produced car, before the personal computer, and before the iPhone was invented. He really wants us to believe that. Like, genuinely. Like, that's insane. Do you not think?
Oh yeah, the thing is he talking about GDP?
I don't even know.
What metric is he
using? No, he's not saying a metric. He's just saying the United States has never been richer than during the Gilded Age up until 1913.
I mean, probably in terms of, you can't even say in terms of concentration of money, because there's bigger wealth disparities now.
Yeah, I know. I saw this graph. Oh my god, I saw this graph. There is about the same wealth distribution now in the United States than there was in France in the 1790s.
And if people don't know, that was when
the French Revolution, when people of France has killed the rich.
I'm sorry, you butchered.
Oh,
your
fuck off.
French
Oh my god.
pronunciation.
Okay, so we've been recording for 3,831 bars on GarageBand. I don't know how long that is in minutes and seconds.
Time.
In time. But I think this is a good time to end it. I don't think we have anything else to discuss.
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so. So I hope to see you. I'd like to send an open message. I'll send an open letter first of all to our local MP.
Okay.
Our local MP, lovely John Pearce. John Pearce, if you're listening, we would love to have you as a guest on the podcast.
We would love to have you.
We'd love to have you as a guest on the podcast. Our local Labour MP, we'd love to have you, man. We'd love to have you. I'll write you a very strongly worded email telling you to be on the podcast. We'd love to have you, man. It would be great. But until then, until we get sponsored by NordVPN as well, we'll see you next time on Playground Politics. Hope you enjoyed.
Hope you enjoyed.
That voice crack, do that again. Do that again.